angry? I hope you are frigging angry. This is a collective crisis that requires collective action.
We hold the power to change the political calculus in America.
We have power.
When do we want it? Now!
We have so much power.
Let our country awake.
And this movement is spreading so fast.
We're gonna go raise a ruckus.
Climate justice!
When do we want it?
We don't want you near us.
And we have to say no new fossil fuel development anywhere in the United States. And it must be a just transition that leaves no workers behind.
We may be stuck at home now, but we're not stopping.
We need action now.
We can't stop just because we're not together. This is our chance to reimagine the best our country can be.
Fire Drill Fridays will continue in a virtual setting until it's safe for us to take to the streets.
We are just getting started.
Thank you, Jane. Yes. All right. Yes. Yes.
Welcome. It's May Day, May 1st, celebrated around the world as International Workers' Day. And so today we're going to focus on workers, especially at this time when the inequities between corporate elite and the working class has never been more evident, shockingly apparent. And those inequities are being played out right before our eyes as the president and his circle try to ram through bailouts for the already privileged and powerful. Yesterday, I was sent a list, not even a complete list, of the frontline essential workers who've died. It is a long list. I wish all the people that only watch Fox knew how many of those frontline workers have died. The Democrats have fought to include financial aid for workers and small businesses, hospitals, nursing homes, and the bailout bills, but more, much more needs to be done. These historic sums of stimulus money aren't going to happen again, maybe even during our lifetimes. And where they go and how they are spent will determine so much about what kind of future we have. So while we insist on more funding to heal the effects of this pandemic, we must also insist that the money is used to lay the foundation for a clean, sustainable energy future, as well as justice and dignity and a level playing field for all workers. You know, ask yourselves, why is it that the workers deemed essential, like orderlies and nurses and doctors and transit and postal, domestic home care, delivery and farm workers, why are these essential workers treated as disposable? You notice that CEOs aren't being called essential. In 1968, Martin Luther King told striking sanitation workers in Memphis, quote, "One day our society will come to respect the sanitation worker if it's to survive. For the person who picks up our garbage in the final analysis is as significant as the physician. For if he doesn't do his job, diseases are rampant. All labor has dignity," unquote. So we have to say no to bailouts for corporate executives and oil billionaires, and yes, to immediately protect the most vulnerable among us. And that includes free COVID-19 testing for everyone who needs a test, including the uninsured. free medical care for those who test positive, and financial and material assistance for working families, including full-time subcontractors. Nobody must be left out of this. And now let's talk about fossil fuels. You know, during this COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen clear as day that the fossil fuel industry, the principal cause of climate change, is an industry on its way out. The transition off fossil fuels is inevitable. The falling cost of wind and solar and the rising stakes of the climate crisis paint a clear path forward. Now, it being a just transition is not inevitable. Justice for workers and communities that have been dependent on fossil fuel extraction won't happen if this transition is left to fossil fuel corporations. I mean, look at the coal companies, where bankrupt companies dole out $1 million bonuses to CEOs while slashing their workers' pension and health benefits. And these are workers that are suffering from black lung. Look at the oil companies that abandon wells and just walk away, leaving workers unemployed and states having to clean up the dangerous toxic mess they leave behind. There is plenty of evidence showing that fossil fuel executives don't give a fuzzy rat's ass about workers or communities' well-being. Those same CEOs are already using this pandemic as an excuse to clamor for more handouts while their workers struggle to make ends meet and die. Now's the time to invest in economic relief and stimulus measures that put all workers and families first, not big corporations. When this crisis is over, let's make sure that the temporary evening applause for our brave essential workers is translated into permanent financial security, including the right to organize a union. When it comes to the oil and gas industry, that means workers and communities dependent on fossil fuel industry are the first to benefit in the renewable energy economy. It means that no one is at risk of losing their livelihood as we phase out of fossil fuels in favor of clean energy, and that we avoid false solutions that further concentrate wealth and perpetuate environmental degradation. We deserve a world beyond fossil fuels, a world in which workers' rights, community health, and our shared climate comes before corporate profits, right? Right now, we have an unprecedented chance to lay the groundwork, but it's gonna be a fight. And that's why we need all of us to rise together. And now let's hear from union leaders and workers themselves about what they're facing and what they need from us, an awakened and mobilized army of people. To start us off, I'd like to introduce Mijin Cha. She is an assistant professor of urban and environmental policy at Occidental College, a fellow at the Worker Institute at Cornell University, and a senior fellow at Data for Progress. Her research examines labor climate coalitions. Boy, how we need a labor climate coalition, and how to support workers and communities in the transition to a low carbon future known as just transition. So let's give a big rally welcome to Mijin Cha.
Thank you so much, Jane. I'm so honored to be here with you today and alongside these amazing movement and labor leaders. It is a particular honor for me to be with you today to talk about just transition on May Day, the Day for Workers. So what is just transition? The basic idea of just transition is that as we move away from fossil fuels, we must support the workers and communities that will lose their jobs and tax bases. We know that we have to stop using fossil fuels if we have any hope of stopping the worst impacts of climate change. But we also know that ending fossil fuel use will cause economic disruption. This is not an argument for continuing fossil fuel use at all. Rather, this is exactly why protecting workers and communities must be central to climate advocacy. Very fittingly, on May Day, just transition has its roots in the labor movement. The great labor leader Tony Mazzocchi talked about how if there can be a fund to clean up toxic land, there should be a fund to support workers who work in these toxic industries. Mizaki talked about how there may be some jobs that are just too toxic for workers to do, and so we should support these workers as they transition into new work. These words ring true today. Today it is fossil fuels that have become too toxic for us to use, but that burden of the transition cannot be on the backs of workers. For too long, workers have had to choose between jobs or the environment. Either you have work or you have clean air and water. This tension is exploited by companies that want to pit workers against climate advocates to stop progress on reducing greenhouse gases. Fossil fuel companies need us to be divided because they are doing less and less for workers and communities. They need to draw attention away from the fact that they employ fewer workers, they poison our land and water, and they're not paying their fair share. But we also know that renewable energy jobs are not necessarily being created where fossil fuel jobs are being lost. Just transition means we create jobs where jobs are being lost. And workers are right to be skeptical of just transition efforts because we have a history of unjust transition. If we look at deindustrialization, for example, we were largely unable to support the workers and communities that lost their jobs and tax bases. Workers who lost their jobs either remained unemployed or were forced to take jobs that paid less with poor benefits. But it doesn't have to be this way. There is no distinction between us when it comes to climate change. Workers are climate advocates and climate advocates are workers. And no one should ever have to choose between feeding their families or breathing clean air. With a just transition, we can have jobs and climate action. The truth is, climate policy is great for our economy and great for creating jobs. Upgrading and retrofitting infrastructure can be done everywhere. Making houses more energy efficient is needed everywhere. And when we say we are creating jobs, we can think about it more like we are creating new work, much of which can be done by our existing workforce. In reality, we are not transitioning workers so much as we are transitioning the work. So, for example, instead of building new roads, we can fix and upgrade our existing roads and bridges. Instead of building new oil and gas pipelines, we can build beautiful green public housing. And finally, we need to make sure that these jobs are good jobs that pay family-sustaining wages, provide benefits, and ideally are union jobs. We will not solve the climate crisis by continuing this pattern of underpaying and undervaluing workers. Ensuring climate jobs are good jobs puts us on the path to a just transition. The COVID crisis lays bare how fundamentally important just transition is. Many of the communities that have poor access to healthcare and are at highest risk are also where workers have had to mine coal or breathe polluted air. We can see how at risk and how vulnerable these communities are. We can and must protect them. And one thing you can do right now is to support the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment and the Kern County Community Resiliency Fund. Though Kern County is home to some of the most productive oil fields, it is one of the poorest regions in our country and has the highest rates of unemployment. They need your support. You can find a link to the GoFundMe on the Fire Drill Fridays Facebook page. I'm so honored and excited to be fighting for a just transition alongside all of you. To echo the legendary Dolores Huerta, sí se puede, yes we can. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you to all the people who are working so hard behind the scenes to bring you this rally. And thank you to you, Jane, for all that you do. Happy May Day, everyone. Back to you.
That was amazing. Yes. Yes. We need a just transition now.
Thank you so much, Mijin. You gave us a really clear picture of what just transition means. And our next speaker is the fearless Sara Nelson, International President of the Association of Flight Attendants-CWA. Sara has been an outspoken champion to save our planet and create millions of good union jobs in the process. This has been reflected in the fact that the Association of Flight Attendants was actually the first ever national union to endorse the Green New Deal. And Sara tried hard to get the airlines to agree to reducing their carbon footprint in exchange for being bailed out. Let's hear it for Sara Nelson. Woo! Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you for everything that you've done to inspire so many, and especially for pulling the fire alarm to bring us all here together today. You know, flight attendants feel climate change at work. From more turbulence that throws us around the cabin with 300-pound carts, to climate events that keep our planes grounded and airport infrastructure destroyed. Even to efforts by the industry to reduce costs by moving to biofuels, more efficient aircraft, and competing on greener air travel with consumers, because even the industry knows the current conditions are not sustainable. But they're not doing enough yet. We know it's not the solutions to climate change that are the job killer, it's climate change itself. The great labor organizer, Mother Jones, said, "The capitalists say there is no need of labor organizing, but the fact that they themselves are always organizing shows their real beliefs." Mother Jones said that in Greensboro, North Carolina in February 1906, as she crisscrossed the country urging us to unite as one against the factory owner and the railroad barons and the coal companies to end the exploitation of child labor. Today, we have a new fight to save our future for our children from an unprecedented crisis. Today, working people have two choices. We can come together and find solutions that kill the virus, protect jobs, secure healthcare for all, and build a green infrastructure so that we can all have the chance to thrive in our environment and our economy. Or we can allow the wealthy and powerful to use hate and fear to divide us, to exploit our labor and ravage our land until it's too late. And then the wealthy and powerful will use this crisis of their own creation to squeeze us harder than they've ever squeezed us before. And they are already organizing. They're giving us a preview of the second option right now. Just as an unprecedented act of solidarity is flattening the curve against coronavirus, the servants of capital are on TV telling us we need to sacrifice ourselves and our loved ones to the altar of the almighty economy. The story that we can't save lives in our economy should sound familiar. For generations, we've been told we have to choose between our environment and our jobs. My dad worked for a timber company in Oregon. I grew up hearing this lie at the dinner table. But we won major environmental victories when coal miners downstream from mines and steel workers in the shadow of the mills forged alliances with the Sierra Club to demand new rules to protect air and water we all share. Today, we must find common ground to stand in solidarity from every frontline community, whether it's the Black and brown families in the shadow of Chicago refineries, or the Navajo children downstream from uranium mines, or the coal communities who have lost everything when the mines have closed and the jobs they were promised have never come. Together we can win this fight, but many workers are wary after years of broken promises. So I ask you to start by opening your hearts and extending your hands in solidarity to people who have been exploited by fossil fuel capitalists for generations. Many of you are already engaged in that work. Last year, Sunrise Movement youth stepped onto the railroad tracks alongside coal miners when Black Jewel Coal refused to pay back wages. That blockade delivered the pay the workers were owed. More importantly, it built solidarity between two groups that have been pitted against each other. There are real solutions that can stave off climate crisis and bring new prosperity and opportunity to every worker. The Labor Network for Sustainability, or LNS, is an organization where labor and environmentalists can stay united and organized together for our future. It will take unprecedented solidarity to win. Even in this pandemic, I see hope. Hundreds of millions of people are staying home, often at great personal cost. It is solidarity on a mass scale. We'll need that kind of solidarity to ensure that saving our climate also gives workers a path to escape the exploitation that got us here in the first place. And the good news is that solidarity is what we crave. It starts with the simple act of telling someone you've never met, "I've got your back." Then showing in action that you mean it. I know we're all isolated right now. You can't turn to your neighbor and shake their hand. So wherever you are, I want you to say it with me as loud as you can. I want you to feel the thousands of people around you repeating it with us. So all together now, as loud as you can, "I've got your back." Say it again. "I've got your back." Thank you, everyone. Happy May Day and solidarity forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got your back.
I have your back.
You're back.
We have
So much, Sara. Thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor to have you with us. I'm so proud of you. And now I'd like to introduce Mateo Newby, who is one of the co-founders of the Movement Generation Justice and Ecology Project. He was born and grew up in La Paz, Bolivia. And since moving to the San Francisco Bay Area, Mateo has worked in the labor, environmental justice, and international solidarity movements. Mateo is also national co-chair of the Climate Justice Alliance's steering committee. Let's welcome Mateo Newby.
Yeah. So welcome.
Welcome.
Jane, it's a real pleasure to be here with you and such amazing folks and family. On this May Day, I am so happy to be honoring our unique contributions as humans to the living world. We have these creative minds and opposable thumbs that are anchor points of what we call work or human labor. And it's this combination of particular talents that allows us to generate such immense beauty and creativity in the world when we apply it freely and non-coercively. And you've invited us today to talk about a just transition. And a just transition is about liberating our spirits from the cognitive concrete that has paved our imaginations. It's liberating ourselves from the drone voice that says there is no alternative to the extractive economy. And when I say extraction, or when I talk about the extractive economy, I'm talking about a system that is rooted in resource-intensive industrial production, and which is completely outstripping the regenerative capacity of our ecosystems. We all learned this in kindergarten. You can't take more than you put in. And that is the key lesson of the historic moment in which we happen to be alive. And yet, this extractive economy looks at forests, these beautiful ecosystems, as lumber. And it looks at people as labor, all waiting to be harvested and exploited. And it's in this context when it's incredibly important to appreciate that this COVID pandemic is not a natural disaster. You've got these big financial entities, banks that literally got bailed out in 2008, 2009, and they then turned around and plopped tens of billions of dollars in these industrial poultry and hog farms in China, where, surprise, surprise, essentially a viral superhighway was created that allowed this coronavirus to flee and move around so quickly. And that then points to the fact that speculators and speculation is at the heart of this extractive economy. And you know, if we understand this, that speculators are the heartbeat of this disease, we then need to appreciate that to speculate is to craft ideas and make choices without evidence. And instead, we need evidence-based economies. We need regenerative economies. We need to return to a right relationship with place and each other. We need to return to right management of home. We need a solutions agenda that restores and repairs historic harms. We need a reparations agenda. Reparations literally means to repair our relations. We need economies that are rooted in deep democracy and accountability to the Earth's living systems and to each other. And it's in this context, Jane, you talked about false versus real solutions, and it's incredibly important to root ourselves in that distinction. As you said, transition is inevitable, but justice is not. And I'll give you a very concrete example. I'm in California, I'm in the Bay Area. The climate crisis has now basically generated a 12-month fire season for us now. We're fighting fires all the time. When speculators look at this, when we allow speculators to manage solutions to the climate crisis in California, what do we get? We get a firefighting force that is composed 30% now of prisoners, of prison labor. Folks, Black and brown folks in shackles are the frontline fodder for this climate crisis. This trajectory does not lead us to a just transition. It leads us to eco-apartheid. So who manages the transition, how it is managed, and to what end are key questions for us to focus on. And put simply, a key ecological principle we need to anchor ourselves in is that social inequity is a form of ecological imbalance that leads to ecological erosions. said another way, what you do to the land, you do to the people. What you do to the people, you do to the land. So the first rule of ecological restoration is to reclaim our labor, to break from the chains of the market and restore our human labor back into the web of life, back into right relationship with the land and each other. That's what a just transition is about, because what we do with our work really matters. And our role now is not to shrink. Some talk about having a smaller footprint or having less of an impact. We missed the opportunity for that easy way out a long time ago. Our task now is actually to have 100 years of greater impact, but towards completely different purpose, in humble cooperation with the living world. Quite honestly, no other species can do it faster or more effectively than us. So we need to undam the rivers, rip out the concrete, build up the soil, cap the oil wells like our lives depend on it, and truly apply our labor together to solve our problems and meet our needs. To build, as I said, these solutions that restore and repair harms, to fully and frontally get behind the reparations agenda. I'm very excited to be in this work with you all, and I truly believe that if we step to this occasion, we can make it happen. Thank you so much, Jane.
Yeah. Thank you. Mayday.
Thank you so much, Mateo. You're that great combination of activist and poet that is so powerful. I appreciate your coming here today. Thank you. Next, we're truly honored to hear from Maria Castaneda. Maria was first elected Secretary Treasurer of 1199 SEIU, United Healthcare Workers East, in 2007, and has twice been reelected. Maria represents over 450,000 healthcare workers in 5 states and the District of Columbia, and is also the highest ranking Asian American woman labor leader in the United States. Yeah. Born in the Philippines, Maria migrated to the US in 1984. She lobbied for the Nursing Relief Act that granted thousands of Filipino nurses permanent resident status and family unification. Maria is also vice president of the 2.1 million member Service International Union. Let's give a rousing welcome to Maria Castaneda.
Yeah.
That's my sister.
Yes.
And thank you, Jane, for your leadership. And I'm so proud and honored to be with the movement leaders in our May Day rally today. My union, 1199 Healthcare Workers, represent nurses, respiratory therapists, housekeeping, dietary workers, clerical workers, home health aide, all other titles that work in hospitals, nursing homes, community health centers, and private homes are all in the front line fighting COVID-19. I know our communities salute and thank them for their dedication and courage during this healthcare crisis. We need to celebrate their courage and their commitment and their sacrifice as we see the flattening of the curve. But despite of that, we continue to see our hospitals are war zones, and our frontline workers are the troops leading the battle to save lives. We have a member that I heard has been sleeping in her car because she is afraid that she will infect and bring the virus, the infection in her house, where she has her parents that live with her that are immune compromised. And through the generosity of the Airbnb that have provided free housing to frontline healthcare workers, we were able to secure her a temporary housing. Our healthcare heroes have been fighting to get the appropriate personal protective equipment so that they can protect themselves as they take care of the patients that have the coronavirus. But as they continue to fight this virus, they see that the universal standards for health and safety and infection control that they have seen in place for many years have been downgraded all the time because they are having supply shortages. These supply shortages are impacting the frontline caregivers and the patients. One of our members that work in the Rikers Island was told, you have to have this personal protective mask that you have wash and clean, because that's the only mask that you will have for the week. And we know, and she knows, that that is so unsafe and it's really a violation of the protocol that has been in place for many years. This PPE shortage extends to our nursing homes, where many COVID patients have been transferred from once they are discharged from the hospital. They don't have the basic gloves, gowns, and masks to take care of themselves and take care of their patients. They're not even told sometimes that there are patients that they care that are COVID positive. Our home health aid is mostly immigrant women at their age 50s, mostly have pre-existing condition. They are also at the last list to get the proper supplies they need. They are seeing more patients being discharged from the hospital to their homes, and in their homes, the home health aid has to care for them. And they don't even have the regular face mask and gloves and gowns, not talking about the N95 that has more protection for infection. Our union 1199 SEIU has been demanding that the federal government release the stockpile they have to get our PPE, the protected equipment for the frontline healthcare workers. We are demanding that the Defense Production Act be involved so that the industries, the manufacturers be repurposed to not just produce masks, produce ventilators, but now the test kits that we desperately need if we want to reopen the economy. With the introduction of the CARES Act legislation, billions of dollars will be pumped into the economy. We want to make sure that the frontline healthcare workers will be beneficiaries in terms of PPE, in terms of hazard pay, paid sick leave, free testing and treatment, childcare support, and transportation. Workers who will be doing the important job of testing and tracing should have the ability to join unions and to earn a family-sustaining jobs with benefits. Any economic recovery from COVID-19 and any transition to a post-coronavirus economy, we must also address the systematic racism that has brought to light the health disparities in our communities. We all know that the statistics that we are seeing, that most of the people that have died are Black and brown people in our communities. And it's not a surprise because even pre-COVID, these are the communities that are suffering from all the social health inequities. And we have seen that the lifespan right now it's not a matter where it's your genetics, but it's what your zip code is. Let's take example of the Bronx in New York. They have one of the highest, poorest city in the Bronx that has the highest rate of asthma, hypertension, and one of the highest case of COVID-19. It's not a surprise because environmentally, the Bronx is the hub of 9 garbage transfer stations, 3 medical waste sites in the boundaries, and diesel trucks just ran up and down the highways of the Bronx, polluting the air. And that's why the Bronx has the highest level of respiratory and asthma in the country. And I must also say that in this fight for COVID-19, we see the hateful rhetoric of physical attack against Asian people, blaming the Asian communities as the source of the coronavirus. And there are so many hate crimes that have been registered in the last 6 weeks. Asian workers are the front line fighting COVID. They are the nurses, they are the doctors, nurses' aid, essential workers who are helping to care for our patients. And today, as May Day, let's join the movement to fight for immigrant justice for all workers. Let's join and call Congress. Let's call this number. This is the Congress number to say we are demanding that on the stimulus for that essential workers, migrant workers should be included because they are the frontline essential workers that have been taking care of us, that are delivering our food while we shelter safely in our home. They protect us, so we need to protect them. Call this number, 1-866-584-3909, and tell them that you are fighting and support the essential workers and immigrant rights for stimulus 4. Thank you.
Yeah, Maria. We're calling now.
Let them know, people.
So much, Maria. I hope everybody will call that number. Thank you for what you do for so many. You have the biggest heart in the whole world, I swear. Thank you. And now I'm honored to introduce Diana Tellefson Torres, the Executive Director of the United Farm Workers Foundation and a National Vice President of the United Farm Workers of America. Founded by Tellefson Torres, the UFW Foundation advocates for farm workers at the national, state, and local levels and reaches more than 100,000 rural immigrants annually through outreach, advocacy, and critical services. Alongside the UFW Foundation won overtime pay after 8 hours a day for California farm workers in 2016 and is working to expand these protections nationwide. The UFW Foundation has mobilized farm workers and their organizations across the country to advocate for immigration reform, pesticide protection, heat standards, and other worker protections, taking hundreds of farm workers to Washington, that's Washington, D.C., to lobby on their own behalf. You know, recently, it also established a deportation defense program, providing legal representation to immigrants detained in the Central Valley. Let's give a big rally applause to Diana for her groundbreaking work.
Yeah. Diana, Mayday.
Mayday.
So much. Thank you, Jane. It's amazing to be part of this rally with you and with one of my heroes, Dolores Huerta, who's incredibly active and is so inspiring to me, and all of the amazing union and activists who are participating today. You know, during this time, really, farm workers are uniquely vulnerable to infection by the coronavirus, since they must often live, commute, and work in close quarters. They're working in substandard, overcrowded, unsanitary conditions often. You know, they're officially labeled as essential workers during this pandemic by the federal government, but farm workers aren't really afforded essential rights. In fact, they've been excluded from many federal and state labor protections for decades. That includes the right to collective bargaining and overtime. So folks can only imagine how the vulnerability of farm workers and all of these exclusions only has been exacerbated with this pandemic. Now, the United Farm Workers Union regularly polls farm workers on its social media platforms. A month and a half into the pandemic, 76% of farm workers who were surveyed shared that their non-union employers had not provided information, nor did workers see protective measures in the fields. In fact, this week, some farm workers were telling us that their employer was telling them to bring their own toilet paper for work, which is ridiculous. So from the start, the UFW and the United Farm Workers Foundation, we've been pushing hard for paid sick leave so that farm workers who are ill can stay home, that they can still feed their own families. Governor Newsom signed an executive order on April 16 requiring 2 weeks of paid leave for food sector employees, which includes farm workers. So now we're working with the administration to remove obstacles to ensuring that farm workers actually receive paid sick leave. And we're pushing to get the state to enforce social distancing and protective measures in the fields. We know that there's a lot of work to do. I think something that is important to mention is, as we're looking at federal stimulus packages, the ag industry is going to get $9.5 billion in grants, plus another $14 billion in loans from the federal relief bill. But it doesn't have any specifications regarding how those funds are going to be used to support farm workers. And yet, farm workers are reporting having difficulty providing their own families with the meals and with the food that they need. At least half of essential farm workers do not receive any federal benefits. They're not going to be getting that $1,200 federal taxpayer check that others are getting because they're undocumented. Many farm workers cannot get unemployment insurance because of their lack of legal status. I was in Delano, California this Wednesday in Kern County, as we were partnering with Chef Jose Andres' World Central Kitchen to provide farm workers with thousands of prepared restaurant meals. And really there's no reason, as I was standing out there providing meals to workers and knowing that they were coming straight from work. You could see the dirt on their shirts. They had not been home yet to go take a shower, but they were lining up for an hour, 2 hours to wait to receive food. There's no reason why the people who nourish us every day should have to worry about feeding their own families. One of our volunteers this Wednesday was a blueberry worker, Karina, who worked through the morning, went home, showered, and then came to the event to help us pass out those 4,000 meals that we gave out that evening. Like Karina, farm workers are resilient. We have to take into account holistically, not just what's in the immediate, which is the pandemic that we're seeing, but also in the long term. We have to deal with undocumented status. We passed the Farm Worker Modernization Act, which is a bill that the United Farm Workers Union, UFW Foundation negotiated with some of the largest grower associations in the country and with lawmakers. We got it passed through the House in December with bipartisan support. We need to get that out of the Senate so that farm workers can access unemployment insurance during these types of emergency situations. Now, the farm worker movement has always linked farm worker rights with community, consumer, and environmental justice. In fact, the first time that DDT, that disgusting pesticide, was banned in America was not by the EPA in the early 1970s, but in a United Farm Workers contract with a grape grower in 1967. Just last year, the UFW and the UFW Foundation sponsored a bill at the state capitol in Sacramento banning the use on farms of the child brain damaging chemical chlorpyrifos. The bill moved and Governor Newsom effectively banned chlorpyrifos in California by the end of 2020 through an administrative action. But that's only as long as he's a governor. We have to permanently ban pesticides such as chlorpyrifos that are not only impacting farm workers, but they're impacting the environment and the health of folks. In fact, Kern County is where all this pesticide is dumped compared to the rest of the country. So we really need to act on that issue as well. Additionally, farm workers are not only vulnerable to what is happening with this pandemic, but they're also being impacted by global climate change. They're working outdoors. There are more hot days each year, making farm workers vulnerable to heat illness and to heat death. We have attended too many, funerals where farm worker families are asking themselves, why did this happen? It could have been prevented. And so we really look at how all of these different issues and these different movements come together. The time is now to work together. The time is now for a just transition. The time is now to act. And this is effectively, this pandemic has opened our eyes. It's showing us that we need to take care of each other. We need to take care of those who feed us. We need to take care of those who help us on a day-to-day, who are essential workers. So let's come together. Thank you, Jane, for hosting this virtual Fire Drill Friday, for your raising a ruckus all of these years and supporting the farm worker movement in different points in our history. And now, clearly, for those watching, please support your local farm workers. Donate to the Kern County Community Resilience Fund. We need your help. We need to act now. Thank you all so very much.
Diana.
Yes, donate.
Thank you so much, Diana, for joining us and for all the incredibly important work that you do. And we will try to be there for you and for the workers in Kern County. It is inexcusable what is done to them, the people who provide our food. Thank you. And finally, last but very far from least, I'm honored to introduce my longtime friend, the intrepid Dolores Huerta, a civil rights activist and community organizer and one of the country's most powerful and respected labor movement leaders. In 1962, she and Cesar Chavez founded the United Farm Workers Union. What is with you women leading the farm workers? It's so great, women in leadership. She serves as vice president and played a critical role. I mean, really critical. She negotiated most of their contracts, and she was very important to all the union's accomplishment for 4 decades. And in 2002, Dolores established the Dolores Huerta Foundation, which connects community-based organizing to state and national movements. Dolores has rightfully received so many awards, among them the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award, which she got from President Clinton in 1998. And in 2012, she won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor in the country, from President Obama. Let's hear it for Dolores Huerta.
Very much. Thank you, Jane. I want to thank everybody, all of us here together on our Fire Drill Friday. And Jane, thank you so much for always being the champion for the Farm Workers Union. You were actually very responsible for us obtaining many of those contracts that I had the pleasure to negotiate. So, you know, we've been traveling a long road together. And also, thank you for all of your support for the environmental movement. You know, I reflected just recently about when they were trying to establish all these nuclear power plants in California. And because of your work, and then with Tom Hayden at that time, you were able almost singularly to be able to stop the building of nuclear power plants throughout the state of California. We ended up with just a couple of them, and we know that some of them have already been closed. And you know, as we reflect on May Day, and we think of our frontline workers and all of those workers that really sustain us, and they're invisible. And you know, that kind of takes us back to slavery times, when it was the slaves that built the wealth of the South, and yet they were invisible to everybody. And that's sort of what is happening right now. And when we think of May Day, we often don't talk about, hey, where does this day come from? That it's celebrated throughout the world except here in the United States. But I'm glad we're celebrating it here today. Well, it actually happened in 1886 when there was an event called the Haymarket Riot. And that was a big demonstration, people were killed. But the labor leaders that were fighting for an 8-hour day, this is what the whole demonstration was about, so that workers could receive an 8-hour day. Well, we have the 8-hour day. We celebrate the 8-hour day. We celebrate weekends. But who were those invisible, unnamed labor leaders? who fought for the 8-hour day. And what happened to them? They were executed. They were hung. And yes, we need to know the names of those labor leaders. And so many of the martyrs of the labor movement, like those that fought for the 8-hour day, and Diana, thank you so much for your beautiful tribute, like the martyrs of the farm workers movement. You know, people don't remember who they are, and we have to remember them, because all of these invisible workers are the ones that actually feed us, keep us healthy, keep us clean, keep us safe, as they're doing now during this pandemic. So I think one of the things that we have to look for in the future, how can we make sure that we have labor studies in every one of our states? Because when labor leaders and workers try to organize, they are met with so much resistance even today. And we have had several administrations that have really fight for the rights, against the rights of workers, as they are doing in today's world. So we have to step up, and we have to fight and support the workers that are really fighting every single day for us. And when we think of workers, when they're organized in a union, what do they have? They have a voice. They have influence. Through organization, they can actually communicate with their workers. They can keep them up to date on things that are going on, like legislative issues, things that really affect their lives and the lives of their families. So this is why organizing and unions are so, so important. In fact, if we reflect, what is it that labor unions brought to our lives besides the 8-hour day? Social Security, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation to protect workers when they get hurt on the job, disability insurance, you know, public workers' compensation. We also have other things like public education. These are the things, safety rules on the job. These are the protections that workers have brought us, the labor unions have brought us. So this is why it is so important that we support labor. In fact, I think that one of the goals that we should commit to coming out of this fire drill rally today is, let's get labor studies in every single school so that people will know what the history of labor has been and all of the things that have been brought to us. And as we take now the time of this pandemic and we reflect, who are the people that are out of work also? We know, as was said before, farm workers, yeah, they're working, but they're not working full time. They're children who, right now are being homeschooled through the internet. But you know what? They don't have the tablets, they don't have the computers, they don't have the things that they need to actually be able to take advantage of this. So let's reflect on all of these people, all of these frontline workers, and think about, yes, when we have the economic recovery, let's also think of the people that work in the fossil fuel industry. Here in Kern County, thousands of oil workers are out of a job. Chevron has closed. What's going to happen to those oil workers when the oil is depleted? Yes, we need to transition them into eco-friendly jobs. And all of us working together, we can make it happen. So, si se puede, want to thank everybody here because we're all working together. And yes, we can create a world that is just, where we do not have racism, homophobia, misogyny, all of these things that we want to get rid of, and making sure that workers are actually the ones that are respected. I want to thank everybody that's here today, and thank you for inviting me to join the rally today. Si se puede, with all of us together.
Thank you, Dolores. It's always an honor to have you join us. You joined us in DC on my birthday, my 82nd birthday, and got arrested with us, engaged in civil disobedience. Thank you for always being there. Okay, wow. Do you realize what a group of powerful people we just heard from? I'm so grateful to all of them for helping us understand what the essential workers they represent are going through and how we can stand with them. And thanks to all of you who joined us to listen and learn with me, because I'm learning too. I want you to know, you people who are tuned in, who have joined us today, that we could not do this without you. You've got to know that. if you want to support the workers you heard about today, there's a new fund for workers in Kern County from our partners at the Center for Race, Poverty, and the Environment. So please join me and Greenpeace in donating to help alleviate some of the immense strain these people are now facing. And you can find the fund by clicking in the link in the chat box. Please, please do that and send whatever you can to help them. And of course, please continue to work your activist muscles from home. If you already, if you haven't, you text Jane to 877-877. It's a quick and easy way for you to get updates and be alerted to what it is we're doing. And you'll find out about opportunities that you can take from home. And in addition, please join me by signing up for our special volunteer program. Go to firedrillfridays.com/volunteer to get involved. We already have hundreds of people, and they are working so hard and they are getting so much information that we really need to, whether we're closeted and sequestered in our homes or out, this is material that will let us have a real impact in Washington, D.C. So if you possibly can, join us as a volunteer. We're going to continue to hold the virtual rallies in the first Friday of each month. And on the Fridays in between, I'll be hosting what we're calling fireside chat fire drills. And you can follow us on social media. That's Fire Drill Friday on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to stay updated on these calls. And next Friday, we're having Senator Elizabeth Warren. I'm going to be interviewing her, and I'm going to be doing something with Lily Tomlin. And it's going to be about how we can go further in supporting the frontline workers. Please join us. And that's a pretty enticing combo, right? Elizabeth Warren and Lily Tomlin. Okay, see you next time.
Woo! Thank you. Thank you. Jane.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for being a part of this community and continuing to fight for climate justice.
Stay tuned for more information on our next virtual Fire Drill Friday rally.
We cannot wait to see you at the next Fire Drill Friday.
Thanks for joining us.
We couldn't do this without you.
See you in June.